Hi there. Welcome into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast. We are coming at you live from deep in the South where sushi is still called bait. And this is the episode once a year where Eric Shell and I pretend like we're Brian Kelly going to LSU. So,
now I have to question what the hell's going on with Mr. Brian Kelly out there down in the bayou. I mean, all it took was a little bit of a little exposure to the old Bourbon Street. And all of a sudden, he developed that accent. Felt like it was overnight.
A little bit of that Southern cooking, and he just fell right into it.
Yeah, all that kicker last night was about as useless as a screen door on a submarine, and that line just let them right through, and they blocked the kick, and woof.
And that screen door did not have any Flex Seal on it either.
No Flex Seal, none at all. All right, as we usually start out our episodes here, gonna have a little QOTD. And I want to know
best question of the day for you rookie listeners out there.
Which of these makes you want to tell your opponent, you better give your heart to Jesus because your butt is mine? Is it losing by less than a point in fantasy, or would you rather get blown out? I'll kick it over to you, Mr. Rikky.
I think I like the blowouts a whole lot better, just because then I know way earlier in the day that I can just give up and let that go, move on mentally to the next week. Whereas if I lose by just a hair, that's really going to bug me for days and maybe weeks to come, depending on my record. Because, if then I can look back and say, well, maybe if I'd have just fiddled a little further with my lineup, I could have squeezed this one out. But if I get blown out and I know that I had no chance, that makes me feel okay.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go I guess for me, it depends on the time of the season, time of the year. Now, if we are in the when the getting gets good in the playoffs and I get blown out, I tell you what, just that makes me feel a little bit depressed about my team, makes me feel like I need to go and visit the old watering hole. Maybe when it may not be most appropriate, maybe, that sunrise comes up and if it's already time to get to getting, I already gotta, if my team is getting blown out by, too early in the day. And down here in the old, the Lone Star State, if it's a Sunday and I already know, after Saturday night's games that I don't have a chance, I can't start drinking until afternoon anyways. So, that just makes it a little bit more difficult during the season on them blowouts, but that really only is applicable during the playoff season when we do have Saturday night games. But during the regular season earlier on, that loss on the hair of my chinny chin, I tell you what, that's one that hurts. That's one that hurts like a gator biting at your ankles. So I think I have to side with Farmer Rick down over there and say that I think I'll take the blowout during the regular season for those given reasons.
I think regardless of what time of year it is, I'd rather just get blown out and just say that, I just didn't have my best team that week, tip my hat to my opponent, and that's that, because I hate losing by the hair of my chinny chin, as you put it there, Mr. Gel. And let's just hopefully I'm on the winning end of those blowouts most of the season. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
I tell you what, man, ain't nothing guaranteed.
Nothing at all. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports on that Twitter machine, at on Facebook, and also on YouTube. We are live at Dead Arm Sports. Make sure you subscribe and click that southern bell in the corner, part of the screen, and make sure you know when our episodes are going live. If you want to follow Gel, he can be found at DOS Gel. I can be found at DOS JPEG. Make sure you subscribe to us and ask us any questions you want, and we will hit you back very quickly. Rikky, been a long time.
Been a while.
Been a long time.
Been a while.
Wow.
It's been a while since this accent's come out too. It's going to take a little bit of rolling in the mud to get this going again here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, for those of you that have been here since the beginning, thank you very much. But this is our stable episode. This is our second annual stable episode. We're going to let you know who our favorite fantasy players are throughout the season. Got our quarterbacks, aka the ranch hand, running backs, aka the bell cow, wide receiver, aka the horse, tight end, aka the oxen, and the illustrious unicorn. We're going to give you our pick for that as well. And yeah, again, these are just our favorite fantasy players for the season, favorite guys we have been targeting in all of our drafts. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kick this thing off and talk about the quarterbacks here. And Mr. Gel, who is your ranch hand? Who's helping out on your farm and leading the charge?
Now, I don't want to, no pun intended here. With my ranch hand, I go for the old school method, no motorized vehicles down on the farm, but I have to get motorized with my pick here as my ranch hand, and that's Mr. Vroom Vroom Derek Carr himself. Now, as we all know, we don't talk a whole lot of NASCAR on this show, so I have to get my car talking down here in the stable somehow. But hey, I really think that whichever team ends up winning that AFC West, one of the our partners out on the West, the AFC version. I think that whoever wins that is going to have their quarterback is going to win the NFL MVP. And I think that the Raiders sure have a darn tootin' good chance at being able to pull that off. Of course, it's the very, very most difficult division in the NFL to win. However, I do really like their offense. I like the hiring of Mr. Josh McDaniels, nice boy himself. And, I also love that Derek Carr, very, very much a Christian man, and have to give him his respects as well on that front. So I'm all on the Derek Carr train this season. Devonta Adams coming over from the north. I know we had a northern farmer on last year. Now it seems that he may have migrated himself down a little bit further south, but Devonta Adams did the same. He went from about as far north as you can go in the Midwest for an NFL team. Well, that ain't exactly right, but but he did make his way down to the Southwest into the desert and joined Devonta Adams, joined Derek Carr down there. He helped Aaron Rodgers, the old psychedelic treatment boy himself, did help him win the last two MVPs, and I think that he's going to help Derek Carr do the same. Additionally, Las Vegas, bad defense. And I think that's going to end up forcing Derek Carr into a lot of shootouts, and therefore I think that he could be a little bit of a fantasy asset to you, and could absolutely be your range hand out on the farm.
To add a little fuel to the fire on that one, if I remember correctly, Vegas has the AFC West as the division with the most 50-point games expected this season. So certainly picking a quarterback out of that division is the way to go if you want points.
And that's why I have him up there. I mean, it's going to be tough for him to outperform your Justin Herbert, who may end up being the number one overall quarterback in the league. Patrick Mahomes, same possibility there, and Russell Wilson, just a very, very tough division. However, I think the value for Mr. Vroom Vroom Derek Carr is absolutely there. I think he's a great third-tier option. Have him slightly higher than my compadre down here in Dallas, Jared Jones' boy, Mr. Dak Prescott. Have Derek Carr slightly ahead of him, as well as Mr. Kirk Cousins, former as previously mentioned, ayahuasca connoisseur Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers, and Matthew Stafford not knowing what his arm is looking like. So I like Derek Carr as a little bit better of an option than all four of those other players as well.
Before we kick it over to Mr. Rick, I did see him wetting the whistle with the nectar of the god and forgot about that segment here. So, Mr. Rick, why don't you tell all the listeners what you're sipping on?
Well, I just got myself a little Oktoberfest. Get ready for the football season from the Lion and Kugel's Brewery up there in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. So I'm just, in that fall mood. It's a little chilly today. Feeling a little Oktoberfest.
Very nice. How about you, Mr. Jill?
I just, went down to the old watering hole, and they sure lived up to the name. Just got myself a little H2O for the episode today.
Yeah, I was at a bunch of hoot nannies over the weekend celebrating some of the kinder birthday parties, and had a little too much beverage myself, a lot of Oktoberfest. So I need a little caffeine pick me up today, and having a little sun drop action. So a little soda pop for you guys. Yes, sir. A little sun drop.
Been a hot minute since I have made one of those.
A little throwback to the old coachman's days.
Yes, sir, it is.
That is a shocker.
All right, Mr. Rick, who is your ranch hand this year?
Well, Jealous kind of alluded to him a little bit there, talking about Kirk Cousins. I see a bright future this season, not necessarily on the record for the Minnesota Vikings, but offensively, I think there's a lot of points to be put up on the board from them. They've got themselves a plethora of weapons with Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen looking like his old self again, KJ Osborne, Irv Smith. They've got a pile of guys who were ready to catch passes, and Kirk Cousins, who has just been, steady as ever for the last many years.
Good old steady Eddie, man. That's what you
Eddie.
need in a ranch hand. Somebody that's going to live it, get up every day, get up early in the morning, and be that steady hand.
Yes, sir. And throw in a Minnesota coaching change, going from mean old Mike Zimmer over to the nice fella Kevin O'Connell coming from the Los Angeles Rams, who gave Matt Stafford one heck of a good season last year. So I just see the weapons, the coaching, and the consistency out of Kirk Cousins making me think that, if I'm in a draft and I miss out on one of the top-notch quarterbacks, I have no problem with Kirk Cousins being one of two guys I might grab later in the draft. So I see high hopes for him, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Vikings later in this episode yet.
Oh, a little foreshadowing there. Like that.
Foreshadowing.
I have to agree with you on the coaching change between mean old Mike versus now the nice Kevin O'Connell coming in. I think back to when I was a trick-or-treater, and I'd imagine Mike Zimmer would be one of the fellers that maybe give you instead of a nice piece of candy, he might give you a roasted maggot or something. And where nice Kevin O'Connell maybe give you a nice fried alligator tender or something. So very large difference in between those two coaches, and mean old Mike versus nice Mr. Kevin.
I can't say I've ever trick-or-treated where you've been trick-or-treating, I must say.
Hey, mate.
I'm more wondering how Mr. Mike Zimmer finds him an alligator up in the north. My ranch hand this year is going to be none other than Mr. Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ouch.
You can get him in the middle rounds of your draft, and you draft him, and I guarantee you'll be happier than old Blue laying on the porch chewing a big old catfish. He's going to get you some rushing touchdowns, some passing touchdowns. Mr. A.J. Brown coming over from the Tennessee Titans. Devonta Smith still there as well. And they're going to have a nice rush game. And I tell you what, he gets to play against the Giants and the Washington football team, a.k.a. the Commandos, twice a season each. So those are some nice schemes there for him. But he took a step forward last year in that offense. It's going to be his second year under the offense there. And I like him this year. So I think you can do a very nice job picking in the middle rounds, get your quarterback there, and you'll be very, very happy.
I have to agree on the Jalen Hurts. I think that especially with the rushing opportunities that are going to be there, they do. Chase Young is already out for the Washington Commandos. Has already been ruled out for the first month of the season. So that's an opportunity for any quarterback, any offensive player playing against the Washington football team to potentially take advantage of his absence.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to a running backs, aka the bell cow. And Mr. Jill, why don't you kick this one off?
Well, I have. I'm going over.
I'll tell you what,
fellas. I'm going to stick with one of my Southeastern boys. He went to college down in the Carolinas at the University of Clemson, and now staying down in the Southeast in the Jacksonville Jaguar backfield. And that's Mr. Travis Etienne. I'm absolutely loving getting Urban Meyer out of town. I think that's going to yield some.
Tell you what, Mr. Jill, that Urban Meyer, I wouldn't walk across the street to piss on him if he was on fire.
Would you piss on him just down on the range, just for fun?
Yeah, if he was on the same side of the street, would you do it then?
Maybe.
It's less walking for you.
Less walking for you, and the opportunity to piss on someone's leg. I can't. That's one of them tougher ones to have to give up. That's quite the opportunity that you would have, Mr. J. Peck. But back to Mr. ATN. I absolutely love Doug Peterson coming in with the exitry of Urban Meyer. And I think that's going to do some very nice wonders. Maybe put on a little bit of a magic show, a little sleight of hand with this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. So I absolutely love the potential there for Mr. ATN. He did have 78 total touchdowns at Clemson over 4 years. That's almost 20 a year if we're doing the math. So I love the college production. He's fully recovered off of his previous injury. His main backfield competition, James Robinson, coming off an injury himself, an Achilles injury. I don't think that's no joke. So I think he may be a little bit eased in a little bit, and it's going to be ATN's backfield. Additionally, they have used him out wide as a receiver. Now we have seen the old Christian McCaffrey be used in a similar way. And that's when he was used in that 3-down package out wide in the slot and in the backfield. We saw some incredibly productive years out of Christian McCaffrey before he was injured. Now, I ain't going to go out here and going on that far of a limb and say that Mr. Etienne could reach Christian McCaffrey type numbers, but I think that the production is absolutely going to be there for Etienne this year, and there is going to be some value for you you fantasy drafters.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that you got to risk it to get the biscuit for, and where he's getting drafted, it's not a bad spot to take him, but we'll see what ends up happening there. Mr. Rikky, who do you got as your bell cow?
Well, if we turn back the grandfather clock 1 year, I selected the same bell cow as I did last year, which is Mr. Ramondre Stevenson, who
bruiser.
I've had a crush on him since he was coming out of college, out of Oklahoma, looking like a speedy little bowling ball, and and now Uncle Bill reports out of camp are that Uncle Bill has a serious crush on this guy, which for those who know Uncle Bill, that's a rare feat to accomplish. Bill is just raving about his hands, his route running ability. James White just retired, so all signs are pointing that a lot of passes are going to be headed Ramondre's way. And in terms of efficiency and production, on a carry per carry basis, he was going head to head with the 15 touchdown Damian Harris last season. If that balances out even a little bit more in Ramondre's direction this year, a little more early down work, he's going to have a lot on his plate and a lot of fantasy production to be had, because I do not see this Patriots offense being a high flying, deep ball throwing, Mac Jones led offense. This is going to be run through the run game. And that is a combination of Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. And I see all of the upside on the Ramondre side of this dynamic duo in the backfield. I cannot speak highly enough of his potential as a receiver and a 3-down back, especially if Damian Harris gets hurt at all. Ramondre will be a top 12 running back immediately if that happens to happen this season, which running backs always get hurt, at least for a little while. So I think we can expect some of those weeks as well.
I like that pick a lot. Fighting Bills up there in New England are going to be running the ball like crazy, like you said. And Ramondre, I think I'd rather have him over Mr. Harris anyways. I think his potential, like you said, especially dynasties through the roof and redraft this year, I think this could be his year. How about you, Mr. Gell? You like that pick?
I really think that if you, we already see Bills out here grinning like a possum eating a sweet tater when he sees Ramondre Stevenson with the ball. So I think that if you are going to go that route and go with a New England Patriot running back, and I think Ramondre Stevenson is the easy pick for you to make. Another, Oklahoma Bowl himself, and Sooner hardly know her.
Well, my pick for my bell cow, we're going to go up to Motown in the Motor City with Mr. Dan Campbell's biting kneecaps. We're going to talk about Mr. DeAndre Swift out of Georgia.
Speaking of biting kneecaps, I tell you what, and we're talking bell cow, I know my dog Sonny, man, he loves him some dried cow kneecaps to chew on.
I bet he does. I think the Lions are going to be a better team this year and be able to run the ball more, which will help out Mr. Swift, even though he's very, very good in the passing game. And the Lions are going to have those games where they're just fighting in garbage time. And you know what? Mr. Swift is out there on the field too. He's going to be busier than a cat covering crap on a marble floor this year. And I think he easily could finish in the top 10 in the running backs this year. Mr. Goff's going to find him out in the flat. He's going to get him some touchdowns as well. So I think Mr. Swift going in the second round of your draft is a great RB1 or even an RB2 option for you if you went RB in the first round.
I could not agree more. I had been considering Mr. Swift for my selection as well. I have high hopes that he will have a whole bucket load of receiving yards to go along with whatever rushing the Lions are able to do. And as you said, they'll be down in a lot of games and he'll still be on the field through all of it. So I expect, I don't want to go to that Christian McCaffrey comparison, but if there's anybody who has never done it, who has a chance to go that path in their career, I don't see much of a better argument than DeAndre Swift out there.
Well, and if we know anything about Dan Campbell and his philosophies, it's all about getting them big old hogs up in the middle of that offensive line going. And best way to get any of those offensive linemen going is a very steady power run game. And that's what I think DeAndre Swift is going to be able to offer you, both production on that ground game to get those war hogs going, get them roaring, get them tusks fighting, and really have them propel forward. And so DeAndre Swift offers you both that ground and pound game, but also the potential upside in receiving yards.
And a true definition of a bell cow if I've ever seen one.
Absolutely.
Well, we've got our ranch hand, somebody leading our farm, and we've got our bell cows going to win us some prizes at the fair. Let's get over and find us a horse that we can ride into that fair. And Mr. Rick, why don't we kick it off with you? Who is your horse this year?
Well, one of my favorite horses to talk about and think about and put on all my fantasy teams is Mr. Michael Pittman.
Mr. Pity City.
Mr. Pity City. I have been rostering Michael Pittman ever since he was a rook. since he was a little. What's a baby horse called? I have
A
not.
colt. A colt.
Oh, perfect.
How?
Is that really it?
What a perfect match. That is a match made in
Or a
heaven.
filly.
Wow, didn't even
Filly
plan
or a
that.
colt. I believe that's a boy or a girl. A colt or a filly.
Well, would you look at that? Because he is an actual colt, and he has a brand new quarterback in town, a very old ranch hand, but one who still can get the job done, because this ranch hand was never a very mobile one before, and he's not going to be now. But he has been supporting great wide receivers for his entire career. His name is Matt Ryan. If you haven't heard of him, he used to be down in Atlanta, and now he's going to be throwing mostly to Michael Pittman. Dating back to Matt Ryan's very first year, he's been supporting usually a top receiver with at least 1,300 yards, sometimes north of 1,600 yards, often with 7, 8, 9, 10 touchdowns to go with it. So for this to be a wide receiver one for Matt Ryan in a solid Colts offense, led, of course, by Jonathan Taylor, a heck of a bell cow he is. Anytime they need to pass the ball, it's first going to go through Michael Pittman. I think it is a guarantee that Michael Pittman ends this season with north of 1,200 yards, and I'd say at least 7, 8 touchdowns. I really struggle to see a way he doesn't eclipse at least those numbers, and it could be a whole lot higher, depending just how much of that target share ends up in Michael Pittman's hands. He always wins his one-on-ones in practice and camp. He's causing fights because he's so darn competitive. I just see every reason in the world that this guy's going to show up as a stud and a top, probably top 10, top 8 wide receiver in this league in these next couple of years. And I think that starts right now with Matt Ryan.
A top colt, if you will.
A top colt, indeed.
Well, I'll just some of my 2 cents on the dollar here for you. Literally in this case, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And my only issue with Michael Pittman is he may not have the opportunity to reach that water. I am not a Matt Ryan believer, a Matty Ice believer. I think he is about as washed up as a hog that just got done rolling through the mud. And the farmer was ready to start cutting that boy up for some bacon. So I think that he is quite washed himself. And, that is my only concern with Michael Pittman. I absolutely love him as a receiver and as a horse, but I do not know if he's going to have the proper opportunity to be able to really show off himself and show off those magical talents and those magical hands that he really has.
Well, Mr. Jail, I'm going to have to disagree with you and side with Mr. Rick here, because Mr. Pittman had a pretty decent season last year, and Mr. Carson Wentz was throwing him the ball. And if you recall, that guy was out there looking as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. And I just don't think that Mr. Matt Ryan's quite done yet. Might have a little Mr. Rivers situation there from a couple of years back where he was pretty decent and was all right. And I think Mr. Ryan's still going to be able to sling that pigskin around, and Mr. Pittman's going to be the beneficiary of that. Mr. Taylor's going to command quite the workload there as well, but I think he's going to be just fine there, being that wide receiver one in the big city of Indianapolis. Mr. Jail, welcome back. Who is your horse?
Well, thank you, sir, for the introduction. I'm going to go with the former Jaguar himself and former Chicago Bear, and go with Mr. Allen Robinson III. Now, if you know anything about his grandfather, that guy had a story to tell anytime you saw him. So Mr. Allen Robinson, the most senior out there, man, he could talk your ear off all day, all night. So that guy, Allen Robinson the third, however, man, he can catch a football with any of them. I think that I'm a large believer in his quarterback, Matthew Stafford, being able to support both of his starting wide receivers. Cooper Kupp, he ain't going anywhere, but we don't need him to go anywhere because we got Mr. Matthew Stafford, the old bulldog. former Georgian himself, and I really think that Allen Robinson, him getting out of Chi-Town, as the Northerners like to refer to Chicago as, more like Chicago, if you catch my drift, Chicago. We don't like them dadgum Yankees up there sometimes, but hey, he's good for him getting out of there, getting out of town, and I think he's got a lot to prove. Very tough situation there previously with Mr. Matt Nagy as his coach, Mr. Justin Fields as his quarterback, and now he's going into a prolific offense that can will absolutely show that 2 wide receivers ain't too much to support out in LA. They can support 2 teams. I think they can support 2 wide receivers.
Oh, I love that pick. It's the Bears offense too. I mean, it gets up there in the low temps up in December up there, gets colder than a witch's tit in a brass bra, and they just like to run the football quite a bit and don't pass as much. So Mr. Stafford had a very fine season last year, leading the Rams to the promised land in the Super Bowl. And Mr. Allen Robinson's got his best quarterback he's seen his entire career. How about you, Rick? You all in on the Allen Robinson choo-choo train?
I certainly believe in all the logic behind why Mr. Robinson's going to have one hell of a season. I have one question for the 2 of you, and that's simply, are there any fears about this supposed season-long elbow injury that Matt Stafford's just going to be managing all season? Is that a concern for either of you? Because everything else makes perfect sense to me that Allen Robinson is undervalued right now, and he's going to have himself one heck of a season. I believe that's possible, but it depends on Matt Stafford's elbow for me.
Well, Sir Matthew has come out and said that he does not expect to have any limitations in his play on the field due to that injury. So may require a little bit of extensive rehab during the week, but on game day, Matthew has said that he does not expect, he expects to be 100% and being able to make all the throws that he normally would make. Josh, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
Gives me a little bit of a cause for concern, but that guy's tougher than a $2 steak, and I think he's going to be fine. We've seen in the past him fight through some injuries when he was up there in Motown, and I don't know, little cause for concern, but I think he'll make it through the season just fine.
I did see a clip the other day. I don't know if you fellas saw this goofy ass noodly looking Amazon football that they've been trying to promote. It looks like it looks like a Nerf football, but I saw Matt Stafford pick one up and throw it what seemed to be like 100 yards. So I think, on the surface, it looks.
Was it
okay.
one of them Vortex footballs we used to have back in the day?
Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like.
One of them NFL straight balls.
It's like if Tom Brady deflated a regular NFL football quite a bit, and it just became sort of long and narrow, and he launched that little sucker.
Well, my workhorse is a little bit like Mr. Rikky's. Mr. Rikky's was a Colt, but mine is a full-on Bronco. He is a bucking Bronco, and that is Mr. Cortland Sutton up there in the mile high city of Denver, Colorado. Mr. Cortland Sutton finally has a good quarterback there. Had Drew Lock and Teddy B there the last couple seasons, and both of those combined are about as worthless as gum on a boot heel. And I just think Mr. Wilson coming over from Seattle is going to have himself a fine season. He's been wanting to unleash, and I think it's going to be all good things. Like you had mentioned, Mr. Rick, earlier on in the episode, they have the most projected 50-point games out in that AFC West, and I want a wide receiver that's going to be a part of that division. And I think it's Mr. Cortland Sutton. Now, he does have Mr. Judy lined up opposite him, but Mr. Judy hasn't really done much from his fine days down in here in Alabama, and we don't know what we're going to get out of him in the NFL. Maybe he's just not an NFL receiver. We'll find out. No better opportunity than this year with Mr. Wilson, but Cortland Sutton is my horse that you can ride to the promised land for your fantasy lineups.
Reports out of camp have been that Russ and Mr. Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton have been really on point, like two dancers doing a two-step dance out there. So really really out there connecting with each other on another level than some of his other receivers in the past. So I think that he has a lot of potential to have a great season.
I couldn't agree more. It may have been a while since I last been on this podcast, but I believe once a year ago I had said, welcome to the Cortland Sutton podcast, because we had talked about him so damn much last year. And here we are again talking him up, and I believe it more now than ever. He's got all the talent in the world. He's a big ass horse in this case.
Fucking Bronco.
Playing for the Broncos with weird ass Russell Wilson throwing him the football. I'm looking forward to seeing Cortland finally break out into what he's always had the potential to be, now that he's got someone with an actual arm ready to throw him a football many, many times every game. So this is going to be fun to watch out there in Denver.
Speaking of big ass horses, let's move on to our oxen here. We're going to talk about our tight ends. I'll go ahead and kick this one off. I haven't went first yet. Mine, we talked about a little bit about city of Chicago, and that is where I am moving for my tight end. Somebody you can find after all the big names are going to be gone, and that is Mr. Cole Kmet out of Chicago. Mr. Matt Nagy is finally gone, so we're going to see a prolific offense here, hopefully, as the resident Bears fan on this podcast. And I want to take a minute to put Mr. Matt Nagy on blast. He was as confused as a fart in a fan factory these last couple of years there, and had no idea what in the hell he was doing. If brains were leather, he wouldn't have enough to saddle a June bug. There's not going to be a whole lot of offense up there in Chicago this year, as much as my little heart desires, at least. But I think Cole Kmet is going to be a fine piece of that offense. Darnell Mooney, David Montgomery are going to be pieces there, but there is a lot of target share left over from Allen Robinson leaving last year, which he wasn't even that good. But we'll see what ends up happening this year. But I think Cole Kmet is going to be their second option in the passing game. Mr. Jimmy Grandpa Graham is finally gone, riding off into the sunset, and Cole Kmet is going to be a nice red zone target. Mr. Darnell Mooney, height's not all there for the red zone. He's more of a deep threat and gets you into the red zone, but Mr. Cole Kmet is going to be flying high, catching them footballs in the end zone this year, and that is why he is my tight end oxen.
Well, I firmly agree on that one. There are two key details with Chicago. Number one, they're probably going to be losing a fair amount this season. And number two, their offensive line is not going to buy Justin Fields a whole lot of time. And those two things combined means that they're going to be throwing a lot, and they're not going to have a lot of time to do it. And that means tight ends are your best friend. And that is where Cole Kmet steps in to fill that void.
My only issue with Cole Kmet this year, and that ain't got nothing to do with his talent. I loved him coming out of Notre Dame as well. But I mean, the truth is, with that Chicago offense, you can't, you can't just butter its butt and call it a biscuit. That offense is just absolutely terrible. Something that the old Raccoons might want to scarf up. So I think that's my only issue with this Chicago offense, is that it's going to be extremely limited, and a lot of times your Oxens are most valuable in the red zone, and I don't know how many opportunities they're gonna have in that red zone. That's my only option. That's my only argument against Mr. Cole Kmet.
That very well could be. We'll find out there. But usually even the bad teams in the league, you still have some diamonds in the rough there. Look at some of the Lions last year. Mr. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a fantasy darling down the stretch, and their offense was very, very useless there. So we'll see. He's just somebody to take a shot on at late in your draft. You got to have a tight end flyer if you miss out on some of the great big oxen leading you through the western mountains to the green pastures of the wherever. All right, Mr. Jill, who's your oxen this year?
I'm going to go up into old Yinzer territory, and I'm heading up to Pittsburgh, and I am a big fan of Mr. Pat Freiermuth. Now, I have noticed it seems like the old Steelers, and maybe this is a function of the Roonies, they really like to keep their draft picks in state. Now, we saw Mr. Fryermuth coming out of Penn State last year, and now this year, their first-round pick, Mr. Kenny Pickett, not the kind of Pickett the kind of picket fence that you may see trying to guard my Oxen's in, but something a true ranch hand out there in Steeler world. But however, I'm here to talk about Mr. Pat Fryermuth. You know, kissing titties. We already know kind of what he's able to deliver on an offensive level. He was just named a co-offensive captain on this fine Monday afternoon. So,
are you pretty excited about him winning that starting role, Mr. Jill?
I gotta be honest, I ain't too excited about that. Gotta be honest, and that information came out on Labor Day. I don't know what it's like to have for you lucky folks out there, what it's like to have Labor Day off, because every day is Labor Day down here on the farm. But that news did come out, and we know that Kissing Titties, he doesn't like to throw the ball downfield that much, and that's going to only open up more opportunities for Mr. Fryermuth. So I really like his potential here. He did show some real nice things as a rookie, and a lot of times you don't see much production out of them rookies as tight ends. So him coming into year two after having a successful year one, I can absolutely see him being a difference maker at the tight end position.
And how long do you envision Mr. Trubisky is going to have that role there in Pittsburgh? You know, he's year after year, he shows little flashes of big plays here and there, and then he shows the absolute worst plays in the NFL for that season. What can we expect for when Kenny Pickett's gonna take over there?
Well, Mr. Pickett himself has to be pretty upset there being behind Mr. Rudolph in the depth chart. I reckon Mr. Pickett feels like he's been eaten by a wolf and shit over a cliff.
I think that, you know, I mean, there's only you know, how many days is it going to be till the cows come home and Mr. Tomlin decides it's time to make that switch? So I mean, it can't be too many weeks into the season. I'd imagine that by the time that the trees really start to turn colors, we may see a quarterback change out in Yinzerland as well.
You know, I think Mike Tomlin would look real good in a cowboy hat. Never seen that, but I
know he would.
Oh yeah, very, very nice. How about you, Mr. Rikky? I know last year was the birth of Kyle Pitts, but who you rocking this year as your Oxen?
Well, now last year, Kyle Pitts, that show was a fun selection for me, and as much as possible, I want him on my teams again this year, but that is not who I've selected as my Oxen. Kyle Pitts is being drafted just a little too high for me to talk about him today, so I'm going with Big Irv Smith out there in Minnesota. He's been on and off the injured reserve list for years, but the story remains the same. This man can catch balls. He's got good ass hands. He's a big, fast fella. And now finally he's got the tight end room all to himself. As I mentioned earlier with Mr. Kirk Cousins, this is probably going to be a pretty high flying offense. Lots of passing. They won't win every game easily, so they're going to be throwing regularly. Their defense is not spectacular. So I expect Kirk's going to have to spread it around a little bit. Obviously, Irv's got competition with Justin Jefferson and company, but I expect that there will be catches for the tight end, as there always have been in Minnesota. But now, instead of being split amongst two fellas, it's all going to be funneled to Irv. And to me, the only question is, will he have another random ass injury that takes him off the field, or can he stay healthy for the bulk of a season? And if he stays healthy, then I have no doubt that he will be a useful tight end in fantasy this year. He falls into the same category as your two Oxen for me, which is if I go out of a draft missing the first, 5-ish Oxen, then I'm happy to double up and take my shot on two of the later round fellas like Cole Kmet, Patty Curly Fries, or Big Irv Smith. Happy with any of them fellas because they all got high potential and they're all falling a bit in drafts relative to those early fellas.
Man, you got me thinking Arby's now.
Yeah, poor old Big Irv. He's been looking like 10 miles of bad road the last couple of years, and I think he can finally, if he stays healthy, I want a piece of that Minnesota offense if you miss out on Mr. Jefferson or Mr. Cook. And why not throw a late round flyer on Mr. Big Irv Smith he was out of Bama too, wasn't he?
Yes, sir, he
Tide.
was. He's only 25 years old. Even after all these years, he's 25, and that is prime time for tight ends to really start making a difference in this league. I think this year's the start of something good for Big Irv.
You like Mr. Irv, Jill?
I only have a small concern in that Kevin O'Connell's offense last year in Los Angeles did not fade the tight end much at all. Now, I will say Big Irv is plenty more talented than Tyler Higbee or the previously highly touted Gerald Everett. However, Irv Smith, when he is on the field, he is a much more dangerous of a target, and therefore, I think that he's absolutely worth taking a shot on this year. However, tempered expectations only because we have not seen Kevin O'Connell, no relation to Mitch, have any impact on have any impact within the tight end room.
We're going to move on to our last category here, and that is talking about the rainbow shitting unicorns. And these are our players. These are our players you can find in the very, very, very late round of your draft to take a flyer on that could prove very, very useful to you this season. Mr. Rikky, you have yet to kick off a category, so I'm going to throw her over to you. Who are you riding off into the sunset? Just make sure you stay away from that horn.
Well, now, I'm going to dip into the same well as before. Similar to Mr. Michael Pittman, I'm going with rookie Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati down there in Indianapolis, playing along with Matt Ryan, who, as Jealous sees as over the hill, I see as a man who was never mobile and still won't be, who has continued to support 1,000-yard receivers and pass catches year after year. I'm not saying that Alec Pierce will get to or even has a chance at 1,000 yards, given that Michael Pittman is in that offense. But as a rookie receiver, what you can hope for is something more in that ballpark of 700 to 900 yards and several touchdowns. And I think that is definitely possible for Alec Pierce, who spent his college career in practice every day going up against Sauce Gardner. Every single report out of camp has been that Alec Pierce is winning his one-on-ones. He's learning quickly. Matt Ryan is building trust with him. Heck of a red zone threat as a taller receiver who can win at the high point of the ball. He's got every chance to be good, given that he's going to walk right into that starting running wide receiver rotation. Paris Campbell will be a little competition for him, but those two, along with Michael Pittman, will be the on the field most plays of the game, along with Jonathan Taylor and big ass Mo Alley Cox. So I see a bright future for Alec Pierce, and I think that can start this year with Matt Ryan at the helm. I know Jealous is going to have a problem with the Matt Ryan part, but aside from that, I gotta believe you're believing in Alec Pierce.
I have to say, I am. Given that we are speaking of potential late round picks, some of the unicorns, that's why I am going to be on your side here with Alec Pierce. Yes, there is, as mentioned, some concerns on Matty Ryan. However, I think that if, I'd feel, about as happy as a dead pig in the sunshine if I was able to get Alec Pierce late in my draft.
Now, if Mr. Matt Ryan throws it back and starts playing like he was slinging the old pigskin around with his papa in the holler. Now, back in those Atlanta days, Mr. Rick, we had a very fine example of Mr. Julio Jones and Mr. Calvin Ridley, two fine wide receivers. But however, one put up a lot of yards and didn't put up any touchdowns, and the other one put up quite a bit of touchdowns. Could you see a similar situation in India with Mr. Pittman and Mr. Pierce?
Well, I can't rule it out. It's certainly possible, but Mr. Pittman is also one heck of a red zone threat. So the combination of both Pierce and Pittman, there's a lot of touchdowns to be had as long as they don't all get stolen by Jonathan Taylor, which is a certain
Mr.
possibility.
Taylor Thomas himself.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas is one heck of a touchdown scorer. So I can't be certain how these touchdowns are going to fall, but it definitely could end up being that one gets the yards, the other gets the touchdowns. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. That said, there were plenty of years in Matt Ryan's career where he was supporting two great receivers with a combination of yards and touchdowns, whether that be Calvin Ridley and Julio or Roddy White and Julio. He has supported two dominant wide receivers many times before, and I can see him doing it again. We know last year was a drop-off, but we also know last year that the Atlanta Falcon receiver situation was a real piece of dog poop. And instead of a receiver, they had to turn to their best pass catcher, their tight end, their Oxen, Kyle Pitts, and who managed to break 1,000 yards in his rookie season. So now that Matt Ryan's being, surrounded by real talent at more than just one position to throw to, I see high upside for both fellas. It may not fall exactly the way we all want it, but it's definitely possible, and that gives me hope.
Very nice. All right, Mr. Gel, who is your illustrious unicorn?
Well, I feel that a bucking Bronco, all he needs is a little horn, and he can turn into a unicorn himself, and that's KJ Hamler. I really think that if you're able to get KJ Hamler as a potential final pick in your draft, you'll be feeling fat and sassy. He can cut through defenses faster than a hot knife through butter, and we've seen Russell Wilson be able to really succeed with some of these deep threats in the past up in the hashtag PNW, and I don't see why he can't support another third receiver such as KJ Hamler. Potentially, I think there is potential for him to be representative as a new version of Tyler Lockett for them Bucking Broncos. And, Russ has already come out and said that he is going to be a dynamic wide receiver 3. So I think that there is a very real possibility that you could get KJ Hamler as your final round pick. And I'll tell you what, I'd be happy if I was able to do that, as I think that there is some boom bust potential. And we have seen injury issues with both Cortland Sutton and Jared Judah in the past. So I think that if one of them two boys goes down, it's going to be the KJ Hamler show to step in and take over that role.
Oh, I could definitely see that as well. Mr. Tim Patrick had himself a fine season last year as that wide receiver 3 in that Broncos offense. And again, that was with the illustrious Drew Lock and Teddy B throwing him the pigskin. And
man, Drew Lock, I tell you what, he's coming back MVP this season. He's going to take over for Geno. It's going to happen.
I'll take your word for it.
All right, my final pick here for my unicorn is going down to the south, down in your neck of the woods, Mr. Gel, and the big old D, and that is Mr. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama University, a rookie. We have news that Michael Gallup is going to be missing some time to start the season here, and I think that's going to give Mr. Tolbert enough time to solidify himself in the lineup and be able to plug him into your flex spot maybe to start off the season. Mr. Dak's going to be looking to throw the ball. We got Amari Cooper that has vacated his presence up to the Cleveland Browns. And Mr. Tolbert is going to be able to go into that wide receiver 2 spot and fill in very nice. I think he's going to catch on faster than green grass going through a goose.
I have to say, yeah, definitely a big fan down here in the old Big D with Jalen Tolbert. I am surprised that, I think Michael Gallup naturally will be a great unicorn given his last name. However, that injury history may not allow him to gallop a whole lot this season. So I think that that is a great pick, Mr. Tolbert, a rookie wide receiver.
Maybe Mr. Gallup will gallop his way into your horse pick for next year, Mr. Gel. We'll find out, though.
See if he makes it into the stable. Can he gallop all the way there?
Feels like he'd have a whole lot better luck over there with the Denver Broncos or maybe the Indianapolis Colts. Then he could really let the galloping begin.
All right. Well,
maybe switch sports and become a Philadelphia Philly.
Now, tell me, do Phillies gallop? Maybe I'm just missing something here.
I believe that's a female horse.
That's a female horse.
That right?
A baby girl horse, a filly. Yes.
I had always assumed that was just a person from Philadelphia. I think
it is for them.
I think it is. I was just gonna say, I think it is for them, but for the purpose of the stable episode, we're gonna pretend they're baby horses.
I can't remember seeing a Phillies mascot looking like a horse at all. That was never something I recall from my
they don't really
childhood.
have a mascot that is actually anything. It's just that big green glob of green furry glob.
Doesn't look like he does a whole lot of galloping.
Philly fanatic.
All right,
gotta imagine inside that suit smells bad enough to gag a maggot.
That's gotta be pretty bad.
All right, well, that'll do it for our second stable episode in the history of the Dead Arm Sports podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Dead Arm Sports. If you want to follow Gel, he can be found at DasGel. I can be found at DasJPEG. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Make sure you click that bell down in the lower right-hand corner. Thank you for the ding, Mr. Gel. That way you'll know when our episodes go live. There's a little chat box on the right of your screen. You can ask us any questions while we're live, and we will be sure to answer them. If you miss our live show, you can send us any questions at Dead Arm Sports, at DasGel, at DasJPEG. More than happy to hit you back with any start-sit questions as we get into the season here. Mr. Gel, where else can they listen to us through the ear holes?
Make sure to hit us up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Pod. Subscribe, rate, and review. Give her the old 5-star rating, and we will be happy as a peach. You can always also find us on youtube.com. We are currently live, but we will continue to go live at least once a week, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, depending on how we're feeling on that given day. Make sure to subscribe there as well, and you will be able to get all of our content.
Mr. Gel and I will be back a little bit later on in the week to recap the wonderful first weekend of college football and give you a little predictions of ours for NFL season upcoming, maybe little awards and some divisional winners there. And be back a little bit later on to preview week 1 of NFL football and week 2 of college football. But until then, thank you all so much for listening. Mr. Rikky, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence again. Really appreciate you
welcome.
Making a comeback and coming back from the old dude ranch you're on for the past year. Learned a lot, I see, about the old stable there.
Oh, yeah.
How all the crops doing?
Oh, they're coming along real nice. It's been a pleasure, fellas. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Gel, close her out.
Well, just make sure that you do subscribe, rate, and review. We are here to deal your pickle.